Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Season 3, Episode 19. Can't believe we're already here. Grace instead of judgment, and adversity is the test of one's character? No, dear listener, no. It's power. It's money. We discuss these overall moral issues inside the story of the Duggar family in the new documentary series Shiny Happy People on Amazon Prime. If you like what you hear, please thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, subscribe, promote to the peoples far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. If you enjoy the program, please support.
Act 1, Grace instead of judgment. The story of the Duggar family.
I believe I've noted on the podcast that I've given up most of my pay TV subscriptions. That includes your standard cable channels, it includes Netflix, it includes Hulu. In making the career change, I realized how much time I was spending in front of the television set, and I just decided to get rid of all these streaming services. Not only because I was spending a lot of money, but in my mind, I'm wasting a lot of time. One of those that I kept, because I, like you, dear listener, am a slave to the convenience, is Amazon Prime. Do I have Amazon Prime because of the magnificent programming that they have on their Prime app? No, I really don't care about that at all. It's nice when something pops into my head and I realize that I don't have it and I don't feel like going to the grocery store, and I tap a couple of icons and I have that delivered to me the very next day. Very much a slave to that convenience. I don't know what struck me. I decided to go on to the Prime app and I found this program called Shiny Happy People. Yes, you too, dear listener, can go and watch it, because I know that you're probably the 95% of human beings in the United States of America that also are members of Amazon Prime. Therefore, you can go and get any of the programs that they have on their app. Shiny Happy People. It is the story of the Duggar family, the fundamentalist Christian family that had 19 kids and a hit television program for many years on what became the Discovery Network, but at the time was TLC, the Learning Channel. This whole situation hit home for me because the Learning Channel was actually a channel that I watched back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean 20 years ago. And very likely it was more than 20 years ago. The Learning Channel actually had programs about learning, about education, about science. Now, some people would call it progressive, amuse, pioneering, inspired even. The producers, many of the showrunners at the Learning Channel, were ahead of the curve when it came to the reality television show, reality television programming, realizing that because it was so cheap to make and that it was so popular, it was an easy way to promote the platform out of a very limited audience, people like me, into a much more mass appeal audience. Now, there are things that we do in life where we look back and we think, what the hell were we thinking? Some of those things could have been just a moment in time in your life, a guilty pleasure. Some of those things you may defend to this day. For me, that would be Aqua Teen Hunger Force. I have turned that show on to many people that I know, and they look at me and they say, what the hell is this? What are you doing? I don't get it. Why are you so attracted to this? No shame in my game. Still enjoy me a good episode of Aqua Teen Hunger Force. On the other hand, there are those that patronized for years shows like John and Kate +8 and the Duggar Family. Watching this television program, this documentary series, it's 4 episodes long, about the Duggar family and their reality television program, I was struck by 2 things that weren't even the focus of the documentary series. The documentary series focuses on not only the family, but this institute that was behind the family, and it's called the Institute of Basic Living Principles. Believe it or not, dear listener, I have a closer tie to those people than one would think. When I was at the University of Tennessee, I worked for an office called the Office of Institutional Research. Won't go into detail. We basically crunched a lot of numbers, data for the school. The job was not during the fall or the spring semester. It also went on during the summer, and you could pick up more hours during the summer. I did work during the summer at the Office of Institutional Research. So I was on campus when most of the people were no longer there. During the summer at the University of Tennessee, the university would host events, and these weren't small events, these were large-scale events for different organizations. And the girl that I was dating at the time worked for part of the university that was doing the marketing for these events, that was doing the promotion for these events. So during the summer, she was extremely busy, and this was part of her degree, her marketing degree. So she was getting school credit, and that she was doing a lot of the work to promote these events, to get everything coordinated and ready. Very much a hospitality planning type role. An organization would come to the University of Tennessee every summer and would fill up practically the entire campus. Now, if you know anything about the University of Tennessee, there is a stadium there that hosts football games. It is called Neyland Stadium. It is the largest, or it may be now the second largest. These schools like to cram in a few seats here and there to try to get the moniker of largest stadium in the nation. The University of Tennessee football stadium is easily 110,000 seats. There is also a basketball stadium at the University of Tennessee. It's called Thompson Bowling Arena. What a lot of people don't know, it is the largest college basketball arena in the nation. There was an event that would come to the University of Tennessee, and all of the dorms for the students would be filled. And that arena, Thompson Bowling Arena, that I believe holds like 24,000 or 27,000 people, would be full. What was this event? It was something that I remembered as just being a home school conference, but it was called ATI. I never watched the Duggar program. I didn't know the extent that they were affiliated with this Institute for Basic Life Principles, but that event that I had seen numerous, and when I say numerous, when those homeschool kids came flooding in with their parents, they came flooding in with their parents. I was standing next to the Institute for Basic Life Principles major event, their homeschool event that was held every year, and it was held at the University of Tennessee. This was 1996, 1997, so this is a good 6-8 years before that Duggar program came out on TLC. I digress. People want to complain about what is in popular culture today, how social media is ruining the brain of the millennial child. Go back and look at, when you watch this documentary, what was being presented in the John and Kate +8 universe, in the Duggar Family universe. These were the number one television programs on television. Number one. This Duggar Family program, and I believe John and Kate +8 was on TLC as well. These reality television programs prompted what was an obscure cable network that focused on learning. It prompted them to expand, to grow. The money started to flow in. This network is now, according to the documentary that I just watched, one of the largest networks because it combined with Discovery, and it now has the Turner label under it. So that movement, the John and Kate +8, the Duggar family, that litter of progeny, all those kids in those multiple kid programs where you then had kids having kids, which was all televised, that created something from nothing. That created an entire network industry. Okay, you've gone on and on now for close to 9 minutes. What the hell is your point? The point is, has anything gotten worse? Has social media made things worse? Are our attention spans worse? Are our tastes, is this palate that we have, this consumption palate, worse? I stand by my Aqua Teen Hunger Force. As a contemporary of John and Kate Plus 8 of the Duggar Family program, I fully stand by that my attention was focused on that program versus on any of these reality television programs. Go and watch some of the episodes. Yes, they're goofy, they're weird, but they're also clever and hilarious. I'll take your friends. Yes, I have seen some of the reruns of those episodes that they're now broadcasting. Bad. Just bad. I'll take your friends, plus your John and Kate Plus 8, plus your Duggar Family, and put that up against some Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Oh, I win hands down. Hands down, I win every time. It was certainly not the point of the program, of the documentary, but I sat there awestruck, thinking to myself, we are so hard on kids today. We can't get away from it. It doesn't matter what the generation is. We always want to point to things and say, look at this stuff. This is what is tearing the fabric of society apart. And yet many of the people that are saying that now, 20 years ago, eyes glued to the television set, watching the Duggar Family and watching John and Kate Plus 8. It was monstrous. You built from your attention a network of monsters because they just continued to pump out all of those trashy reality television programs that end up becoming both iconic and despicable in the same era. The Honey Boo Boos of the world. I'm trying, dear listener, I'm trying not to let my ego get so far in the way. Ultimately, we need to look at each generation with grace. Whatever was being put in front of them that became that popular culture sensation, that wave, it's so easy to look at it and judge it in your experience, in your wisdom. Yet go back and look at your resume. What were you watching on television? What was your quote-unquote guilty pleasure? How does that stand the test of time? Speaking of looking at resumes, while watching the show, it also struck me how much of a culprit the network was, TLC was, in all of the terrible things that happened during the course of that show, and to particularly the women in that show. But you couldn't even call them women because most of them were minors. They were girls. He is innocent looking in his goofy, awkward dumbassedness. And I know that's really not a word, but if dumbassedness could ever fit into the English language as a Webster's dictionary word, it would have a picture of Jim Bob Duggar. My God, that's the real name. That's the man's real name. It would have a picture of Jim Bob Duggar sitting next to it. Fully in my ego now, dear listener. Fully appreciate it, and I'm not going to judge it. Jim Bob was more than willing to take advantage of his family with this network in tow. I mean, I don't want to call the network the conspirator, but certainly they were an accomplice to what was this man using his female progeny to make money without any consideration of what they felt about it, what it would do to them in the long run, what kind of long-term impacts it could have on them, and without any thought of sharing in the wealth with his family. The documentary tries to make this more overarching, more global point about how it's this Institute for Basic Living or Basic Life Principles that is the catalyst or the prime mover of such attitudes. But this goes back to the piece that I did on Mehmet Oz, on Dave Ramsey. You put a ton of money into someone's face and you give them the promise of more money and more power and more control. It's very tempting. How many of us can actually say, yeah, that happened to me and I was able to resist that temptation? Even where, in this particular circumstance, The man was dealing with his own family, his own children, his own daughters. And maybe TLC was more than an accomplice. Maybe they were a conspirator. One of the interesting elements at the end of the documentary series, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything, these girls, and again, they were girls, these girls were often signing documents where they were either a minor when they were signing, and they were doing so under the auspice that their father could sign for them, but they were still signing these documents. Even worse, B, they were signing these documents, listing them as minors after they had reached the age of consent. And their father tricked them into signing these documents, and the corporation, again, TLC, this is a sophisticated, organized television corporation, accepted that the man could sign on behalf of his quote-unquote minor children, even though they knew, by way of the show that they were using to promote those children, that they had reached the age of consent. They were either 16 or 18. It reminded me immediately of Nike, because as many of you know, you don't need the documentary series to reveal as much to you. The eldest son was charged with and convicted of child pornography. He had explicit images of child pornography on his computer, which a law enforcement agent called some of the most disturbing images he had ever seen. TLC, of course, backs away from the family and tries to hang on, to cling on to that cash cow by promoting a show with a couple of the girls. Of course, those girls weren't in control of that program. It was their father, that good old Jim Bob. Jim Bob had his fingers all over like a puppeteer, the program, the people, and particularly his daughters. The point being, it reminded me of Nike, and it reminded me of Lance Armstrong, and how much money, when people began to gravitate to it, how much money it generated, therefore how much more money Nike invested in it, in the Live Strong movement. Same thing here. When the Duggar thing took off, you had TLC pouring money back into it as much as they could, trying not to kill the golden goose, to get it as plump and fat as possible. I have a hard time believing that as inextricably linked as these camera crews were to the Duggar family, for as long as they were, they had no idea that anything was going on, just like many people have opined that there was no way, after all of the years that Lance Armstrong had been accused of cheating, there was no way they didn't have any idea that some of those rumors could be true. It's much, much easier to just take the money and feign ignorance than it is to have any kind of corporate responsibility. And of course, corporate responsibility now means doing a bunch of things that conform to some woke ideology. Real corporate responsibility is identifying whether or not one of the cast of one of your reality television programs molested his sisters and was a child pornography fan. Looking at it from below, trying to get out of my ego, it's the same thing. Whether or not it's a corporation, whether or not you're part of the corporation, in a position of responsibility, when that money comes flowing in. I mean, if you've been working in television for a while, or maybe you're just getting your first opportunity, and you get what is your first opportunity or last opportunity, and it's a network that's on the outer edges of the dial, TLC, most people aren't watching it, and you somehow catch lightning in a bottle and have this program that becomes the bulwark for the entire network, a television program that spans the course of 10 seasons and has multiple different spin-offs, and also provides the cash flow to do what? To create other programs, to go out and acquire other networks, to actually raise the profile of the network such that it gets status and money consistent with other primetime cable networks. Who cares if it's child exploitation, right? I mean, if you're part of the Nike organization and all you hear from the old hands is about what it was like to catch lightning in a bottle with Michael Jordan and how that exploded the brand awareness and profile of Nike, and you're part of the Live Strong movement, that you are an instrument in the Lance Armstrong generation of Nike. You see all of that money come pouring in. You see a movement that is consistent with, or maybe even bigger than, what happened with Michael Jordan. You sure as hell will believe Lance Armstrong when he says that he didn't cheat, and that everybody else who accuses him of as much is either petty or jealous or a liar, or all three. In sum, my 2 takeaways from Shiny Happy People: quit being such a judgmental prick, and that's a great reminder. I get that reminder over and over again because that ego comes creeping back. The things that we liked, that we had such an affinity for, well, we may not remember them as accurately as they are depicted when you watch them again after a good 15, 20-year hiatus. So grant the kids some grace and judge not. And although I'd like to think I'm a very ethical person, I like to think that I've changed my life for the better through this spiritual journey that I'm on. No one has waved $400,000, $500,000 in my face to do an episode of a television program and then said, what, you want to do 15 episodes? You want to do 20 episodes at $500,000 an episode? Every time I see that Jim Bob on the television screen, I do have that semi-clenched fist. He is a very punchable human being in that obnoxious, moralizing way. Yet, would I do something different? God, dear God, I'd like to believe I would.
Act 2: to test a person's character, you don't give them adversity. You give them power.
I love that quote by Abraham Lincoln, and I try to live by it. I've tried to live by it for a long time, but I think I better understand it now as I've gone through some of the things that I've gone through over the course of the last 30 months. And adversity is what we want in order to test our character. I believe that we actually want that because it's easier. It's easier than having the test of money or power, because that's truly the measure of one's character. You look at the situation with the Duggar family, and I have every belief, every expectation that when the Duggar family got on that television program, they wanted to convey to the world a fundamentalist Christian household that could operate successfully in this modern world. Look at this model of a Christian family, of people living with Christ in their heart, and how it can change what is the stereotypical household that you're seeing on TV, which has so much conflict and turmoil. The Duggars were members of this Institute for Basic Life Principles, which is no more than a Christian cult that denigrates women to a subservient role. As you see time and time again, it became a money grab for the patriarch of the entire organization. Can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. Goddard is his last name, I think. I'm not going to look it up. The point being, just a very old story, a very common story. And we can sit there and wag our finger and say, oh, look at that, look at them, look at what happened there. And we can criticize Christian fundamentalism or fundamentalism in any other church. I'm going to give you another example, dear listeners, and that would be the Nation of Islam under Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X. Think about that. Let's harken back to that. When Malcolm X got out of prison, when he was Malcolm Little, he got out of prison and went to an organization that I believe had 3 or 4 mosques in the New York area and maybe one in Chicago or one in Boston. We're talking about an organization that had a very small footprint. Within a decade, it was a multi-million-dollar organization with mosques in practically every major city in the United States. When the Duggar show went on the air, no one in the Institute for Basic Living Principles movement, they had no idea what kind of phenomenon that show would become. No one in the Duggar family, particular Jim Bob, had any idea of what a phenomenon that show would become. and how much attention and how much money would be generated after every succeeding episode. You don't mentally prepare for that. That's not what you see down the road. And that's what you have to wrestle with. That's what it is to have this power that tests one's character. When the money starts rolling in, when the attention starts rolling in, and when those two things combined start giving you leverage, you start to get your way. You can exercise authority over others. What does history show us? Most of us are going to fail. Most of us are going to fail that test. Whether or not you have a spiritual background, Dave Ramsey, Jim Bob Duggar, Elijah Muhammad, whether or not you're one of these tech bro millionaires that hit it big, the money will test your character, particularly when it comes on fast, particularly when you can't even initially grasp the scope of what the money and the intention are bringing you. Remember when Tiger Woods went on his sex spree? And I know you do remember it, dear listener. A spree that went on for several years. One of the things that he said in reflection on that, after he kind of broke out of the spell of what it was, one of the things that I can remember him saying in reflection was, these women, they didn't really want to have sex with me. They wanted to have sex with Tiger. They wanted to have sex with the icon that they saw on television. That powerful person, that magnetic person, that person that got all the attention. And they associated that thing with the name Tiger. The reality was, Eldridge Woods was still a human being, still had all the same problems that we all do. Yet when the money started to come in, and the attention, and the power that comes with it, it's hard to remember that you are Eldridge Woods, that you are Jim Bob Duggar, that you are Dave Ramsey, that you started from this place where you had very little, if nothing, and you were scraping by. The doubt, the insecurity. As much as it is a blessing to get all that money and attention, that power, it's a curse. It's clearly a curse. We know as much because of another documentary type series called Behind the Music on VH1, that you could have a series that went on for multiple seasons, not just a show that had 6 or 7 episodes for one season. This was a show that had, 12, 15, 20 episodes a season, and there were multiple seasons of behind the scenes with different bands. Obscurity, scraping by, dealing with all the doubt, and then you have that breakthrough song, that breakthrough album. And what happens? You go from obscurity one day to fame and fortune the next, and you're still the same person. And it's only when the people around you convince you of your fame and fortune that you start to embrace this persona. Would we escape it, dear listener? We feel like we're the ones who are cursed because we haven't attained such status, such stature, yet we're probably, blessed. It's a blessing that we are operating in this world of anonymity, that we are truly surrounded by the people that we gravitate to, that we resonate with. Our friends are actually our friends. Our work is measured in its value. Having said all that, am I ready to be blessed with great riches and fame? Of course. Am I ready to put my character to the test? Yes, I am. Am I saying that out of ego? Maybe. Though I really feel like the only reason I could be as bold is because I have gone through the things that I've gone through. That there would be a realization that you'd wake up out of that dream on occasion and say, these people don't really like me, the real me. They like the person they see on TV. They like the person that they think exists in this world of money. To be able to navigate that world, to operate in it, that is a true test of one's character. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.